Hey guys, welcome to Karenology. You won't believe how far some people will go to cause trouble. They say retirement is supposed to be peaceful. Slow mornings, coffee on the porch, the sound of wind against the screen door. That was the plan when I left Phoenix and moved into a small Adobe-style home at the edge of the desert. I was 62, widowed, with a stiff back, and too many memories. I didn't need much. Just a quiet place and a bit of water to keep my little backyard oasis alive. I built the pool myself, nothing fancy. Just enough for a slow backstroke and to take the heat off my bones when the sun got aggressive. The water came from a well on my property. Same well my father and grandfather used back when folks settled here and everything wasn't regulated down to how high your fence could be. I had all the permits, signed and sealed, tucked in a rusted metal box in the garage that still smelled like motor oil and old tools. It was a Tuesday morning when I got the call. The voice on the other end sounded like someone reading a court sentence. You've been found in violation of community water use policy. Immediate action will be taken. I said, "Excuse me? What violation?" But the line had already gone dead. It wasn't a request. It was a verdict. 3 hours later, I stood by my pool, in boots and a flannel shirt. Coffee forgotten on the porch railing. As a crew in reflective vests uncoiled hoses. They were draining it, my pool, my well water, without so much as a conversation. The one in charge, a square-faced man with sunglasses, too clean to trust, handed me a paper. Authorized by the Homeowner Association, he said flatly. Water misuse. That's when she arrived. Karen, she always showed up, like a storm in a floral blouse. Blonde, broad, overly confident. The self-appointed queen of the Homeowner Association. "We warned you," she said with a smile too sweet to be anything but venom. "We can't have residents wasting water. This is Arizona. There are standards." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cuss or throw the paper back in her face. I just looked her dead in the eye and said, "You're making a mistake." She tilted her head like I was a confused old man who'd forgotten where he was. "It's not personal," she said, and then walked off, clipboard in hand, like she'd done the world a favor. But it was personal. It always is when someone strips away something you've built with your own hands. That pool wasn't just water and concrete. It was mine, a piece of dignity in a life where I'd already buried too much. That evening, I sat in the garage, with the metal box open on my lap, flipping through the yellowed pages of old property records. My father's name was on them, bold and black like the man himself. One document stood out. A water rights agreement from 1972, signed long before the Homeowner Association even existed. It was all there, clear as the sky before a summer monsoon. The well was private, and I had legal authority over its use. They didn't just overstep, they broke the law. I lit the wood stove, poured myself a cup of decaf, and thought about my next move. They thought I was just some quiet old man with a pool. What they didn't know was that I had the law, the land, and half a century of stubborn in my corner. And I wasn't going to let this go. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Old habit. My joints complained as I swung my legs over the bed, but something deeper than pain moved me that day. A quiet burn in the chest. Not anger, No, anger fades. This was purpose. I put on my oldest boots, the ones with the cracked leather and stories soaked into the soles, and walked out to the backyard. The pool lay there like a wound, dry, silent, forgotten by the desert air. You could still see the line where the water had been. I stood there a long time. The birds were just beginning to stir when I turned back toward the house. First stop? The county records office. The young woman behind the counter looked like she'd never seen a paper map in her life. But I had my father's folders, a notarized copy of the water rights contract, and a clear tone in my voice. She brought out the archive boxes. We went through them together. And there it was again. My property sat directly above a legacy well, private, registered, and exempt from municipal allocation. More importantly, the documents confirmed that the Homeowner Association had no authority to interfere with that well. None. On my way home, I picked up a cheap scanner at the hardware store and started digitizing every document I had. I made copies, sent them to a friend of mine in Flagstaff, who'd once been a paralegal. He called me back an hour later. "Matt," he said, "they screwed up. You've got a case. A damn good one." That night, I called a meeting. Not an official one. Not yet. I invited a few neighbors, folks I knew by name and handshake. Joe came, the retired firefighter with a temper like a stove burner left on low. So did Alice, who volunteered at the library and always baked too much. We sat on my porch with lemonade and folding chairs, and I laid out the story. They listened. Joe rubbed his jaw and muttered something about how Karen had fined him last year for a bird bath. Alice said she'd stopped watering her tomatoes because of the fear. That's what it was. A quiet fear, soaked into the soil of our neighborhood. Nobody said it out loud, but we'd all been walking around on eggshells, waiting for the next notice, the next fine, the next official order. When I finished, Joe leaned forward. "You gonna fight him?" "I already am," I said. "But I want it to mean something. I want this to stop happening to all of us." There was a long pause. Alice was the first to nod. Then let's make it public," she said. "Let people see what they're doing." I nodded. "We start with the fountain." That fountain sat at the entrance to the neighborhood. HOA's pride and joy. Constantly running, even during drought alerts. Fed, I'd learned, by the same underground vein that crossed beneath my land. I didn't have to cut it off, just pause it, for maintenance, legally. The next morning, it was dry. No announcement, no press, just a quiet trickle to silence. By noon, Karen's email went out to all residents. "Unexpected malfunction. Technicians have been contacted." But the fountain wasn't broken. The system was working just fine. I just wanted people to notice, and they did. By the time the weekend came around, the fountain had been dry for 4 days. Folks noticed, not just in passing, but in whispers and driveway conversations. The kind of murmuring that spreads faster than fire on dry grass. I spent most of that Saturday in my garage, turning old papers into evidence. I'd never seen my scanner work so hard. The fan inside whined like a tired dog, but it got the job done. I had affidavits, dated permits, and photographs, some of them showing the original well system my father built with his own hands. All of it went into a neat little file on a thumb drive labeled Truth. That evening, Alice knocked on my door, holding a pie. She didn't say a word at first, just handed it to me with a look that said more than a sermon ever could. "You're not alone, Matt," she finally said. I nodded, not trusting my voice. By Monday, the HOA held an emergency meeting. Karen, of course, presided. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. Joe called me right after. "They're scrambling," he said, laughing like he hadn't laughed in months. She tried to get funding approved for a backup pump, but half the board's against it. You shook 'em. It wasn't about the fountain. It never was. It was about control. Karen didn't like that hers was slipping. That week, things got interesting. Joe told me he'd overheard something while replacing his mailbox. Karen had been in contact with a contractor, trying to discreetly reroute the water supply around my well. A workaround. Illegal, if not immoral. I filed a formal cease and desist, backed by documents, sent copies to the county, to the local paper, and even to the HOA board members directly. Then came the letter. Not from the HOA, but from a lawyer representing them. A cease and desist of their own. Accusing me of obstruction, threatening me with court. It was bold, desperate. I brought the letter to my friend in Flagstaff. He read it, chuckled, and said, "They're bluffing. Classic pressure tactic. They've got nothing if this goes to court. But you do." Still, pressure is pressure. That night, I sat in my chair, watching the desert sunset bleed across the sky. I thought of walking away, letting it go. But then I heard kids down the road, playing, laughing. Their voices floated over the fences like echoes of a time when neighborhoods felt like home. No, I wasn't walking away. The next day, I printed flyers, not angry manifestos, just facts, simple questions in big, bold letters. Do you know where your water comes from? Did you vote for how it's being used? Are fines the only way to communicate? Joe and Alice helped me tape them to every mailbox, every bulletin board, every lamppost. We didn't yell. We didn't march. We just asked. By the end of the week, 3 more neighbors came by. Quietly, like they were sneaking into a confessional. They had their own stories, their own frustrations, and something else started to change. People began talking to each other again. Karen, of course, didn't like that one bit. It was the second week without the fountain, and by now the silence at the entrance of the neighborhood felt louder than any gurgling water ever had. Something had shifted. People walked slower past each other's yards. They paused. They spoke. Sometimes just a nod, sometimes more. But it was different. Real. Karen, however, was anything but silent. She went on the offensive. An HOA-wide bulletin landed in everyone's mailbox. 4 pages of carefully worded policy reminders, veiled threats, and twisted versions of the truth. She accused a particular resident of spreading misinformation, compromising communal harmony, and tampering with shared infrastructure. She never said my name. She didn't have to. 2 days later, a bright orange notice was taped to my front door. Pending violation hearing. A full list of infractions was stapled to the back. Overgrown shrubs. Improper storage of tools. A mailbox that allegedly sat half an inch too low. It would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. That night, Joe brought beer. We sat out back, where the stars were honest and the desert air didn't play games. He asked if I was okay. I told him yes. Not because I didn't feel the pressure, but because I'd felt worse. and survived it. I spent the next morning with Alice at the local print shop, putting together a small newsletter. We called it The Other Side. Just 4 pages, same length as Karen's bulletin, but ours had facts, scanned documents, a timeline of the well's ownership, quotes from state law, and one big question on the last page: who's really serving the community? We didn't distribute it ourselves. That might have caused more trouble. Instead, we handed it to Tim, the mailman who hated the HOA almost as much as he hated junk mail. He smiled, took the bundle, and said, "You didn't hear it from me." By the end of the week, the whole block had read it. That's when the cracks started to show. A board member, Christine, mid-50s, glasses, always looked like she was carrying more than her share, reached out, quietly, said she didn't agree with everything Karen was doing, said she'd tried to raise concerns before, but was always outvoted or ignored. She handed me something, a printed email thread. Karen had been instructing the board to withhold certain information from residents about fees, about water usage, about policy votes that were never really voted on. It was gold. I thanked her and asked why she brought it to me. Christine just looked tired. "Because someone needs to clean house, Matt. And you seem like the only one not afraid to pick up a broom." I went home, scanned the emails, added them to the growing file labeled Truth. Then I called my friend in Flagstaff. "It's time," I said. "Let's talk legal strategy." And just like that, what started with a drained pool was about to overflow into something much bigger. It started with a whisper at the hardware store, then a comment at the diner. By Monday morning, people were talking. Not everyone, but enough. The emails Christine gave me had weight. I didn't post them online. I didn't need to. I simply included them in the next issue of The Other Side. Highlighted lines, annotated footnotes, and a simple headline: transparency or control. Joe called it a slow-motion landslide, the kind you don't notice until your feet are already sliding. The Homeowner Association sent another letter. This one more panicked. "Cease unauthorized publication." They called my newsletter defamatory, baseless, disruptive. But they didn't challenge a single fact. I framed that letter and hung it in my garage. Then the fountain went back on. At first, I thought it was Karen trying to reclaim ground. But then I saw the sign. Reconnected by resident request. The board had voted without her. 3 members had abstained. 2 voted in favor, Christine being one of them. A tie would have killed the motion, but the deciding vote came from Carl, the treasurer. He'd never said a word to me. Always looked like a man one bad week from a meltdown. But now he'd broken rank. Karen lost it. Emails, threats, emergency notices. She tried to override the board's vote, called a special session, even contacted the county. But the damage was done. She'd lost control. And then she got sloppy. I received a plain manila envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside were 2 things: a photo of a check made out to Karen from a landscaping contractor, dated 3 months prior, and a copy of a proposal the HOA had rejected to resurface the community tennis court. The contractor was the same. The check was significantly large. Bribe, kickback, call it what you want. I scanned it, sent it to my lawyer friend. He took one look and said, "You've got her." But I didn't go public. Not yet. Instead, I met with Christine and Carl at the old community center. Just us. I laid the envelope on the table and said, "I'm not looking to burn this place down, but I won't let her keep running it into the ground." Carl didn't say much, but Christine did. "Why, we've wanted to remove her for years," she said. "But nobody wanted to make the first move. We were afraid. And now?" She met my eyes. "Now we're angry." The next day, a petition was drafted. Simple language. Clear demands. 1. Immediate vote to remove Karen as chair. 2. Temporary freeze on all fines issued in the past 6 months. 3. Independent audit of HOA finances. Joe and Alice walked it door to door. I stayed back. This wasn't about me anymore. Within 48 hours, they had over 70 signatures. The minimum needed was 51. Karen's last bulletin came out that Friday. It was bitter, rambling, a diatribe about order, tradition, and how some people didn't respect the rules. It read like a farewell or a warning. I kept it right next to the first letter they ever sent me, because the next chapter was already being written. And for once, it wasn't by her. The meeting was set for Sunday afternoon in the school gymnasium. No one used it much anymore, not since the budget cuts closed down the community programs. But that day, it was packed. Folding chairs, thermoses, paper fans, the quiet murmur of old neighbors with new thoughts. I sat in the back. Karen stood at the front like she always had, chin high, clipboard tight to her chest like a shield. But something was different. Her blouse was wrinkled, her hair slightly undone. The smile gone. Christine opened the meeting. Calm, direct. "We're here to vote on a motion to remove Karen L. Montgomery as chair of the Homeowner Association, effective immediately. This motion has met all procedural requirements." Karen tried to speak, but the room wasn't listening. They were watching. And that silence was louder than any argument. The vote wasn't close. 74 in favor, 13 against. The rest abstained. She didn't cry, didn't shout. Just stood there for a moment, then gathered her papers and walked out. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. It wasn't that kind of victory, but it was won. The next week, the fountain ran again. But not constantly, only during community hours. A conservation plan was posted on the board, and for once people read it. They voted on it, too. Fines were frozen, cases reviewed. Several were overturned, including mine. Carl resigned from the board, said he was tired. Christine stayed, said someone needed to rebuild the trust. As for me, I fixed the mailbox, trimmed the shrubs, even repainted the porch. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The neighborhood felt different now, like it belonged to the people who lived in it, not just the ones who ran it. One evening, Alice dropped by with her grandson. He was maybe 6, with eyes full of summer. He looked at my pool, now filled again, the water catching the sunset like it was holding on to fire. "Can I swim in it?" he asked. I smiled. "Only if you promise not to cannonball near the tomatoes," he laughed. Dove in like freedom had a splash. I sat back in my old chair, the one with the creaky arm and the faded cushion. Sipped my coffee, watched the boy swim. Sometimes justice doesn't come with applause. Sometimes it looks like a quiet yard, a full pool, and a kid's laughter bouncing off the walls you once had to defend. And sometimes that's more than enough.